You're live. Hello, folks. Welcome to Leon's Library. A little slow on getting started, but we're here. So I'm here with Dr. Anthony Pappas here in New York City. We're live. You got somewhat of a view behind us. You can see the Queensboro Bridge there and some of the skyline of Manhattan in the distance. Not the best view, but we're here in any event to discuss issues that are contemporary that you may find you may raise. This will be a call-in show too. You'll have an opportunity to call. The call-in number is area code 315-796-4000. Again, 315-796-4000. So in any event, we are down here in Long Island City, actually, so you can see Manhattan in the background. Not so much good from this particular window setting, but in any event, we do a lot of work here in the city in terms of reform efforts, and Dr. Pappas here on my left has been involved in this reform movement for many years. He has quite the ordeal to share with us today, and again, I want to allow everybody to know that you will be able to call in if you like, and that number again is 315-796-4000. We are an organization, Citizens Against Corruption, the Citizen Commission Against Corruption, which is a nonprofit entity organized under the laws of the state of New York. It's a nonprofit that has 501c3 status, so any contributions you make will be deductible. And the CCAC sponsors this program, Leon's Library. It's intended to raise discourse on events that may be current, maybe in the past, and to achieve reform. Yesterday, we played, it was a long show, 2 hours, and we did play the latter half, the video of our Parent March on Washington. And we're looking at doing something this year as well. We just don't know what. A lot of great contributions yesterday and so forth. And in any event, I want to welcome Dr. Pappas. Tony, welcome to Leon's Library.
Happy to be here. I hope we can unite and help each other and help all the victims in the family and divorce courts and other civil courts across the United States.
Okay, and we're here in your backyard now. You were born and raised in New York City, right?
That's correct.
And you're a retired professor at St. John's University?
That's correct also.
Now, you got a lot of degrees that are just absolutely impressive. A PhD from Yale. I believe it's a master's degree from MIT. Is that right? You've got some other degrees from different institutions. So you carry with you quite a lot of background in education. What got you into teaching at St. John's? And I guess that's in finance, right? What got you into this line of work? When I graduated, I felt I would be working in the financial industry, working on Wall Street. And I did work there for a while, but there were, problems in terms of job security. So I decided to also explore the teaching field in the universities. Someone suggested St. John's. And, that was close by to my residence. And I fortunately was hired there and, worked there for close to 45 years. Now, and that's a long time. And obviously you've seen a lot of change in those years. And at some point, I believe your divorce pretty much started about the same year that mine did. And it was very protracted and went through quite the ordeal. But maybe before we get into your particular ordeal, and then we'll open it up for call-ins, you did some pro se work back during the 1990s. I know we talked before opening up this program today here in New York City, and you gave me some background on things you did that you're quite proud of, and rightfully so. You're not an attorney, you're not a litigator or anything of that. You've got no court experience prior to the 1990s that at least that you shared with me, but you did engage in some litigation back then. You challenged, I believe, a diocese, if I'm right, in a case that you brought in federal court. You took it right up to the federal appeals court here in Manhattan,
and you ended up litigating that by yourself, pro se, without any attorney. Is that right?
Yes, basically that's correct.
Tell us what that was about, because you were not successful. There were no rulings there that, you were not ultimately successful with the lawsuit. But you did get some vindication in the end. And it's quite humorous, but it's also pathetic. And when you hear about this front page story that ends what occurred with this litigation. But tell us what motivated you to file this. You're very principled, obviously. And you saw a need to bring an action in your own right without representation, and you moved it right through the system, through the federal courts. Back in the 90s, it wasn't as complicated as it is today, but you managed to get it through the courts. Tell us, what you did, what generally was it about, and maybe how it ended. Go ahead.
All right. Well, when my children were born and they started attending school, they attended a parochial school at St. Nicholas Greek Orthodox Church in Flushing, New York. And I became active in, the Parent Teachers Association and the other branches of the church governance there, parish council and so forth. And I began feeling that there was some fraudulent activities taking place, which the head priest was keeping quiet, and he was benefiting from it. So after some controversial actions where, he refused to give me communion and so forth, I decided to file a lawsuit against him, the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese, and many other people from the St. Nicholas parish. And I filed it as a civil RICO action, Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organization Act. And that's how I got into the federal court. And it went up to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, which ruled that, most of my filings were okay, but they felt that I had not shown proximate causation between the pattern of racketeering and the injury, which was a prerequisite for the RICO case to proceed. All right, well, I accepted that and then went to the state court to just allege, standard mail fraud, and that I was affected by that. And for just standard mail fraud, you don't need proximate causation. So the case should have gone forward, but the state courts just dismissed it because, the Second Circuit had dismissed it and they didn't want to take it up. So eventually I had to, leave the parish with my family, and we moved elsewhere. But after many years, the head priest there made the front page of the New York Post, and the headline was "For the Sake of Crust," and not for the sake of Christ, but for the sake of crust, because he was making pornographic videos with a mistress. So Greek Orthodox priests are allowed to marry, and this priest, had a family, and he was a grandfather, but he also had a mistress. He had been transferred to another parish away from, St. Nicholas, where he was in the 90s, but in that other parish up in Washington Heights, he, engaged in adultery and making pornographic videos with his mistress, who was married. He impregnated her with no educational background. He made her principal of the parochial school. He made her signatory on the church accounts, which the news media alleged that they were stealing from. So he made, as I say, the front page of the New York Post. So I was vindicated in that manner many years after I brought the lawsuit in the federal and state courts.
Well, I have to commend you because that's not an easy task, and you were in both federal and state. You managed, and my understanding is you actually were able to argue in front of the justices of the Federal Appeals Court in Manhattan. Is that right?
Yes.
So you were physically in front of them, fully square, way up on the 26th floor, whatever it is. It's been a while since I argued there, but you were like with all the other lawyers there, and you made a presentation.
Yes, I did.
Now that alone must have given you some vindication. I mean, in the sense that you're able to, present what you saw as an injustice. And obviously you got far enough where they allowed you to argue, although you did lose in the lower court, the federal district court, but you had to put together all the briefs and the record. I know from my own experience, that's quite a Herculean task. Granted, that was 30 years ago, but still you managed to do all that. And RICO is not an easy action to bring. And they gave you some credence because you were allowed to go back to state court. But ultimately, you didn't get your vindication in the courts, but you got it so-called in the court of public fate, maybe. I don't know what you would call it, but
court of public opinion.
Right, and fate with respect to what happened to this particular guy. So it's not just the Roman Catholic Church. You have, the Greek diocese. You have this going on all over, and now it's become very, pronounced. When was this article, the front page of the New York Post? It was fairly recent, wasn't it?
I think it was like in October 2015.
Okay, so you got some vindication. You did bring your pro se action. It took how many years?
For the
whole process, yeah.
Well, it started in the early 1990s and it ended around 1998.
Wow.
So the title of the case is Pappas v. Passius, Passias. So he was the main defendant that I sued together with other church officials and people that were participating in his fraudulent schemes.
Now, more recently, you became, I would say a victim, but a litigant. Your ex-wife brought an action for divorce against you, and you litigated at that time. Grounds were required, so you actually went to a jury trial to demonstrate the grounds. And then when that concluded, which my recollection from what you told me earlier today, that ended in 2009 or thereabouts, and then started this really horrific, protracted litigation over assets, equitable distribution, as they call it. So from like roughly 2009 to the present, still ongoing, you are still immersed in this divorce litigation, which is now, about 15 years old?
Well, it started towards the end of 2004, so now it's close to 17 years.
Wow.
Since December 2004.
And you spent some $2 million in fees through all those years, is that right?
That's correct. Some part of it was I was ordered to pay the legal fees for my ex-wife. I was also ordered to make pendente lite payments, even though our separate incomes were approximately the same. She worked, but the judges can do whatever they want. So I've been a victim of judicial bias and abuse, and that's why I'm advocating for an overthrow or an abolishment of the doctrine of judicial immunity, which is, I feel, the root cause of injustice in many of the civil courts. So it's not family and divorce, but it's other courts like guardianships or conservatorships. We've had the case of Britney Spears, which is a civil court case, and there are many other civil court cases where the rules and the procedures are vastly different than what we see in the criminal courts, where the standard is, guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. But in the civil courts, it's preponderance of the evidence And it's often, of course, what a single judge deems is a preponderance of the evidence, because it's very hard to get a jury trial in the civil courts.
In my book, Whistleblower in Paris, part of chapter 3 is devoted to your ordeal. And Whistleblower in Paris is available at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, the major bookseller sites. You can always get it on. It's about my ordeal as a whistleblower. And there's just numerous ordeals and cases that are featured in this book. Tony's is one of them, because when I came across his situation, actually, I think he found me online and felt the need to get me involved in his litigation to try to expose the corruption that was going on. We did a lot of that in various ways. We went to the United Nations, a family law reform conference. Tony was with us at the Parent March on Washington. He was an expert speaker there. During our second day evening, we featured a bunch of five experts at the Congressional Ballroom of the Holiday Inn. Tony was also involved in various rallies in Long Island. He's gone to some of the ones recently where children were victimized. You'll find him in so many of these locations. He is currently serving on the board of directors of the CCAC, which sponsors this program, Leon's Library. CCAC is the Citizen Commission Against Corruption. You could look it up online. As I stated earlier, it's a 501c3 organization granted tax-exempt status by the IRS. And we're looking to take in donations and contributions and investments in an entity that will be able to come to places like this. I'm here in New York City right now, Long Island City to be specific, in a high-rise hotel. And you can see the backdrop of Manhattan, not too well in the background, but you can see Queensboro Bridge to verify that we are here and we are an entity on the move. Tony, in your book, something that I always found fascinating, and I highlighted it, at your ordeal, you summarized and you've put it in various pamphlets, reports, and things that you have issued. And I think even in your litigation, if I'm not mistaken, your divorce litigation, and you call it the trifecta of judicial bullies. It's something you came up with. I was kind of entertained by it. What is the trifecta of judicial bullies? That I guess is 3 judges that were involved in your divorce case. Why don't you walk us through that?
All right. Well, again, unfortunately, if you wind up with biased and abusive judges who tend to support each other as their colleagues on the bench, or they're supportive of each other, then you can become a victim and suffer tremendously. Fortunately, in my case, the children were not involved because they were over 18 or became over 18. So there wasn't issues regarding child custody and so forth, but it was basically equitable distribution of assets. And as I have said, because of judicial immunity, the judges can do whatever they want. So one judge accused me of committing a violent Class B felony where I should have been in prison for up to 25 years. He accused me of making terrorist threats.
Now let's just stop for a second there. This was a hearing officer, Stanley Gartenstein, right?
Right.
And the way he, characterized you as a terrorist is he made parallels to an event that was timely then, and that was located, I believe, in a footnote to the front page, first page of one of his decisions. Tell us how he manufactured this terrorist perception of you. And I think at one point you were had your hands on the table or something or another. You were reaching for your glasses. Tell us how it transpired, the way he singled you out and traumatized you, really, in the manner. And Tony's never been charged with a crime. He's got a perfect record. He doesn't have, there was never any, convictions of any kind, not domestic violence, child abuse, or any of that. His children were adults at the time this all got started. There was no child issue. Tell us more how Stanley Gartenstein made a terrorist out of you.
Well, he made a terrorist out of me because I submitted, I don't know, a letter or some correspondence to him, trying to argue that, my ex-wife, was not a responsible person. She was a guidance counselor in the New York City public school system. And, she was supposed to be, guiding and advising, children in elementary school, but she had psychological problems herself. And I drew a parallel in my correspondence between her condition as, being nominally a guidance counselor, but sort of needing psychological help herself, and that between Nidal Hassan, who was the person who committed the Fort Hood massacre in Texas.
He was a psychiatrist too, wasn't he?
He was an Army psychologist also, so you would think he'd be able to help the soldiers who were suffering from, trauma connected to their work or their experiences, but instead he wound up killing, I think, 13 soldiers and wounding around 20 at Fort Hood, Texas. So according to Gartenstein, I made numerous threats in the idiom used by the perpetrator of the Fort Hood massacre. But Gartenstein, recused himself. And when I tried to get vindication, for example, I went to, the FBI, and I told them, look, he accused me of being a terrorist, look into it. They could not do anything because they did not have a jurisdiction, or there was no willingness to investigate that he had been abusive. Same for his other charge, that I had committed a violent Class B felony and had fractured my wife's face. There was no proof that she had gone to the hospital. No surgeon was mentioned who had performed the surgery. There were no hospital bills, but he basically wrote, I had committed this felony. So again, I'm saying, look, he's treating me abusively, and he's hallucinating this or just making it up. But the appellate courts or the Judicial Conduct Commission or other parts of the government were not willing to exercise oversight over the judiciary branch. And that's why I have become an advocate for the abolition of the doctrine of judicial immunity. And I'd like to bring up the landmark case on it, which is a horrific case of the 20th century. It's called Stump, S-T-U-M-P, v. Sparkman. And this occurred in, I believe, 1971.
78.
Well, the case
started in 71, right?
The case started in 71. So in 1971, Judge Stump in Indiana, he violated the due process rights of a 15-year-old girl, and he had her permanently sterilized by a tubal ligation. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with medicine, the fallopian tubes carry the female eggs from the ovaries to the uterus, so they can be fertilized by the husband. So when you tie up the fallopian tubes, you permanently sterilize the female, and there's no way to reverse that operation. So the 15-year-old girl, there was no hearing. She did not have an attorney assigned to represent her as a minor. The judge lied and told her, go to the hospital to have your appendix removed. She didn't know what had happened to her and didn't have a chance to appeal. She married a couple of years later, tried to conceive and have children, and learned she had been permanently sterilized. So she tried to sue Judge Stump and others involved. She got a favorable ruling in the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals in Chicago, which covers the Midwest. But then it was taken up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they ruled 5-3 that judges have immunity and can't be sued. So for 50 years now, this has been a guiding precedent in the court system, and it's a horrible decision which needs to be overturned and abolished. So again, I think it would make an excellent, talking point as we advocate for justice. Look up the case Dunphy-Sparkman if you're not familiar. Make up leaflets or billboards or other material that you hand out, and point out that the judiciary branch has immunity based on this horrific decision where a 15-year-old girl was permanently sterilized by a tubal ligation, and the courts refused to overturn this ruling or to modify it in any way. So what I feel we need to do is we need to try to reach out to other individuals and organizations to get help. And with this doctrine of judicial immunity, as well as all the abuse that has taken place in the civil courts, where mothers, fathers, and children wind up despairing, they commit suicide or they commit murder-suicide, and no one is held accountable. Now, in order to do that, one group of individuals that I've tried to engage would be religious leaders. So we, of course, have many religions. We have the Catholic Church, the Greek Orthodox Church, we have Jewish rabbis, we have Muslim imams, we have Protestant pastors, and different Protestant congregations or religious groups. So we should try to reach out to them and try to get their assistance in dealing with this horrific injustice that is affecting everyone across the United States. So one approach that I've tried is to write letters to Pope Francis in the Vatican, and it's something that I would suggest that all of you try to do. You may not get a response right away. I had to write several letters over several years, but eventually I got a response where the Pope expressed his blessing for the information I had provided, and he was blessing me. So the address for Pope Francis in the Vatican is very easy. The address is His Holiness Pope Francis, Apostolic Palace, Vatican City. Vatican City is its own country. Sometimes the post office clerk is not aware of that, and he'll ask you, you can't be addressed to Vatican City, you have to address it to Italy or some other situation. But point out to him that Vatican City is its own country, and it's a proper address for reaching the Pope. A 1 cent, a 1 ounce letter by a global first class mail costs $1.30, $1.30. So it's easy to write letters to Pope Francis at the Vatican. In addition to that, one can also try to get an impression by contacting Catholic organizations here. There, of course, is a Holy See mission to the United Nations, which you can find on the internet. It's headquartered in Manhattan on 39th Street. That's Holy See mission to the United Nations. You can contact them by email or telephone them, or even try to go there in person. The Vatican also has the equivalent of an ambassador in Washington, D.C., except it's the nomenclature is the Apostolic Nunciature. So you have a papal nuncio serving as the ambassador of the Vatican to the United States. That's located in Washington, D.C. There again, you could look this up on the internet, and you'll get the street address, you'll get a telephone number, and an email that you can use to contact the Apostolic Nunciature in Washington, D.C. But here again, you can reach out, as I said, to other religious groups, or you don't have to be a member of a particular religion. You can contact the Protestant pastors who are not part of a hierarchical church. You can contact other religious entities and try to get the support by bringing up this horrific doctrine of judicial immunity and the terrible impact it has on families across the United States. They destroy families, they destroy mothers, fathers, and children, and the judges need to be held accountable. So again, let
me just cut in, Tony, this, for those of you who want to read Stump versus Sparkman, it is the seminal case that started judicial immunity, and it will outline the history of how it came about, carried over from England, and then the whole, tubal ligation ordeal that Tony just summarized for you. And that case is, it's a 1978 Supreme Court decision, volume 435, U.S. Reports 349, against Stump versus Sparkman, 435 U.S. 349. Tony, and getting back to your trifecta of judicial bullies, the second judge was Falanga. I forget his first name, but
Anthony Falanga.
Okay, Anthony Falanga was involved only a short while. I mean, in comparison to the the 14, 15-year ordeal, divorce here, and he issued an edict, and I'm going to read it because it's in my book, page 32 of Whistleblower in Paris. For those of you who have purchased the book or care to down the road, it continues to grow in terms of its circulation. But here's what he directed you to do, and for you listeners, this is just an amazing a dictate that was given to Professor Pappas in court. I believe it was in chambers, what have you, but the judge was frustrated what he was beginning to learn about Tony's advocacy for human rights and reform of these courts, exposing what he just described to you, this Stanley Gartenstein, comparing Tony to Nidal Hassan and the idiom of the Fort Hood massacre, this whole terrorist depiction that he gave against Tony. But now we got his replacement, and here's what Judge Falanga stated directed to Tony. And by the way, from my understanding, this has not been changed. It hasn't been, set aside, vacated by either the original judge who issued it or any judge since. And it goes like this. The judge to Professor Pappas in court: I'm admonishing you right now. You are not to communicate with anybody inside the court system, outside the court system, about how you feel you were being treated or anything like that. If you feel I am violating your rights to free speech, you have the absolute right to feel that way and do whatever you feel is appropriate. If I decide to hold you in contempt, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Do you understand? Now, there's several things, and in yesterday's program, I addressed some of these. There was a caller who came in and asked, well, how can you go to jail over, you're filing an action, for example? Well, here the judge comes right out and says he will hold him in contempt if he simply violates this very broad scope order. And whatever triggered it, I don't believe was ever even mentioned. But the judge himself, during his edict, during his order, recognizes it could be a free speech violation, and we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So he knows that Tony has this right to speak. We're only talking about, and remember what the judge says, both inside and outside the courtroom, anywhere. Don't even talk about anything here. Now, how do you even make a report to a judicial commission? Because that would be a communication outside the courtroom. and directing him, not even to explain or to relate how he feels. So this particular gag order, as Tony has referred to it, when it was issued, that's still in effect. Is that right?
Yes, it is, but it's sort of gone by the wayside, and no one is paying attention to it.
So you've continued to go out there and attend events and address the news. You even ran against AOC here in New York City. This is the district for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Tony was the first Republican endorsed candidate who ran against her when she in her very first effort to become a congresswoman. So you were out there in the news. This actually impaired, technically speaking, this was still in effect, would have affected your ability to even speak, during that campaign. And there was another event, I'd like to get to it, but we're kind of running out of time here. I'd like to open up for anybody who wants to call. But, you were impaired in that congressional race, not only by this edict, which you were wondering if any point in time somebody might come and put an arrest warrant on you for violating this order, but there was also a seizure of your campaign accounts, which was created, as I understand it, under the federal election law, and the monies were taken to satisfy the divorce judgment. Tell us a little bit about that. This even impacted your ability to run for public office. Would that be correct?
Yes, it did.
What happened there?
There was a judgment issued against me in terms of what Judge Zimmerman ruled that my wife should receive, and to try to get the funds, her attorney or the court were sending out notices to the banks where I had accounts to seize the funds.
And Judge Zimmerman is the third judge of this trifecta of judicial bullies. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so go ahead.
Yeah. So I had an account at the TD Bank in my personal name, but I also had opened a separate account, Anthony Pappas, for Congress, where the donations of my supporters were placed. But with the order to the court to seize the funds in an account in the name of Anthony Pappas, they also mixed it up and also took Anthony Pappas for Congress, which was, of course, a separate, distinct account with its own tax ID number, and it had been properly, it had been appropriately set up under the, federal election laws, but that's never been rectified.
And you actually brought litigation there as well, if I recall, and that was not successful, or was it just left in limbo? They never, if I recall, you saying that was never, like you say, never resolved. It was just
Correct.
left to, wow. Okay. So there you go. Talk about targeting. Here was an endorsed candidate for Congress whose funds were misappropriated and which were used to satisfy a divorce judgment, clearly not within the rubric of a campaign. But at the same time, there was a congressman out in California who was being prosecuted for misuse of funds. And is that right? And who was that congressman? Duncan Hunter?
Yes, I believe that was his name.
So here he was being prosecuted for misuse of donated funds. And clearly divorce satisfaction is a private, matter. And so, did you go to the government authorities too? The Federal Justice Department maybe, or anything like that?
I believe I did, yeah.
Okay. In any event, so that was that the trifecta of judicial bullies. And anyone who wants to call in and ask any questions, we will open up. We're going to continue to talk, but I will give you that number again. If you want to call, feel free to do so. It's if you have questions of either Dr. Pappas or myself. Again, Dr. Pappas is a member of the CCAC Board of Directors. He's had this horrific divorce that went on some 14, 15 years, spent over $2 million in fees. no child issue, and he's not been able to exit it. That case is still pending and proceeding, and it has really taken its toll on Dr. Pappas. But the number here is area code 315-796-4000. Again, 315-796-4000. So while we're waiting for anybody who does want to call in, Tony, there are other aspects that you want to offer the listeners as well. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, again, as I say, we have to reach out to other people to help us. Sadly, if we reach out to legislators or people in the political realm, they probably are aware of this problem. But since their career background is that they've been lawyers or attorneys prior to becoming elected to political office, they don't pursue justice, and they keep quiet about this problem of judicial immunity. So we have to be circumspect in terms of who we approach. As a politician, hopefully it would be a person who does not have a background as an attorney, but who will be willing to, take up the cause of justice. Now, in connection with that, we've seen recently that Congressman Paul Gosar of Arizona was censured by the House for running this Anine cartoon or whatever, where he cartoon showed that he had killed Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and then went on to attack President Biden. And so everyone agrees that there should be accountability for someone who just ran a cartoon threatening to kill people. Now, what we can say is that the situations we run across are where people actually die. They're not cartoons or fantasies. They're actual situations where people die. So one should go to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and tell her, why don't you take up this issue of judicial immunity and hold investigations about what are taking place? So we can go to other politicians and bring that out to them also, that what the courts do are not cartoons. They actually engage in all these tragedies. And we, of course, have in our area here out on Long Island, we had the Thomas Valva situation, an 8-year-old boy that was killed by his father, who was a member of the NYPD. We had the death of Kira Franchetti. She was, I think, 2 years old. Across New York State, there are reports that there have been about 725 child deaths over a decade or over 10 years. And these child deaths aren't investigated, and no one is held accountable, or nothing is learned in terms of reforming the legal system from these child deaths.
Let us not forget Gabriella Boyd as well. Steve Boyd, his 2-year-old daughter, she was killed by the mother, who's now doing a life term. But we've already heard from Steve 2 days ago on the live program here, and all of what Steve endured to get justice there. He's still at it, working on reform efforts. He's on our board of directors, just like Dr. Pappas is. And we've all worked together very well over the years and came together for this nonprofit organization with the hope we could organize enough unity among groups to make a voice for parents, because we really currently have no lobby group in Washington or in any of the states advocating for our interests, while our adversaries, if you want to call them that, the bar associations, public interest groups, special interests. We have a lot of organizations tied in to this family court and divorce court system, that there was no one really to oppose them. With the Governor Kathy Hochul, the new governor of New York, she appointed this blue ribbon commission to study forensic evaluations, abuses, if you will, in custody cases, in divorce and family courts. And many of the speakers at the hearings, the virtual hearings, one I heard while I was waiting to be called, he was a psychiatrist, and right from his office, he made it clear that he thought all these forensic evaluations should be abolished altogether because of the harm they were creating. And during my practice, I ran into psychologists that I wanted to retain as experts on cases I was handling. And I ran into those that refused the assignment, even though they would have been well paid. And the reason given was that they're doing more harm than good by getting involved in this litigation. And that's good. We see people that do have a conscience in all the professions, and that was good to see in some of the cases I handle. But in any event, we need more of that accountability. And with Governor Hochul, she's now facing Letitia James, the current Attorney General of the state of New York. She's doing an investigation. She's opened up one in the city of Saratoga involving abuse of what she believes are, protesters who were abused up there by law enforcement. They were blocking the streets. They were interfering with patrons in restaurants and doing all those forms of protest that I don't consider peaceful. But in any event, she can open up an investigation in Saratoga under the bureau of that office, the Attorney General of the State of New York, the bureau being the Human Rights Bureau. Then certainly one can be opened up to study cases like Dr. Pappas, like Stephen Boyd's daughter, and all these cases that are, so many are laid out in my book, Whistleblower in Paris.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
right,
Tony.
But again, we have to sort of agitate in a constructive manner. And as I said, try to connect with people in your neighborhood or your community, Protestant pastors, Catholic priests, political leaders that you think might be sympathetic to the cause of justice. And one way to do it that I would suggest is, try to create like a leaflet. I'll show one here. It doesn't show up very well, but it's a picture of Thomas Valva, the 8-year-old that was killed, and Kira Franchetti, who also was killed when she was, I believe, 2 years old. And this will attract people's attention. And then in the lower half of the leaflet, you can either talk about judicial immunity or other horrific aspects of the court system. It's probably better to talk about, the generalities instead of your own particular situation. Just talk about Stumpy Sparkman and the permanent sterilization of a 15-year-old girl, or again, make copies of your leaflet and make 200 or 500 copies. They don't cost a lot of money to make, and then start handing them out when you go to agitate in the churches or at the town hall meetings or in other groups that you're a part of. And again, you can also use it if you try to contact the Holy See Mission to the United Nations, which is located in Manhattan at 39th Street, or the Nunciature in Washington, D.C. You can mail it to them and try to get people's attention by creating leaflets and handouts that will educate people about this injustice that is widespread across the United States.
Well, very good, Tony. We still have an opportunity if anybody wants to call and ask either Dr. Pappas or myself any questions, or to bring up a different subject or anything that might be in the news. You're welcome to call now. We are in New York City live. I came down here to work on a project and thought it'd be great to interview Tony right here rather than through the means we had been using for other guests. I think it's great. Anybody wants to call, it's area code 315-796-4000. Again, 315-796-4000. It's the same number we've used. It's on my website and so forth. We do have a caller, so I'll take that. Hello, you're on Leon's Library in New York City. Go ahead.
Hi, Leon. It's Andrea. How are you?
Hi, Andrea. I have Dr. Pappas with me.
Yes, I know. I have a question for Dr. Pappas. When he was talking about going to the clergy and, religious leaders, and I've tried that to a degree. It was more or less, I did let them know that it was something that wasn't just our case, that it was rampant. I never really got a result, but I was curious, has Dr. Pappas gotten any results from engaging with the religious leaders on this subject? Have they done anything or started any movements, after they found out what was going on, after they were told what was happening? What have they done? If anything.
Well, the letter from the Vatican, right?
Well, I did get a letter from the Vatican that stated, I believe I have it in my pocket here. It says, the Holy Father has received your letter and he has asked me to thank you. He appreciates the concerns which prompted you to share your thoughts with him. His Holiness will remember you in his prayers and he sends you his blessing. Now, again, this is encouraging in the sense that it's an acknowledgement of that I wrote something and I'm receiving the Pope's blessing, but it's vague. It doesn't indicate any specific issue or there's no specific action that has emerged from that. But the letter can be used as an introduction to other, Catholic priests or Catholic organizations. And as I say, that's what I'm advising other people to do. Probably it's more effective that instead of like a single person, trying to make contact, that you go to a religious leader with a group of, 4 or 5 people. These could be your relatives or your neighbors. And as I say, Protestant pastors might be more receptive because I believe they can take the initiative in terms of trying to take action. The Protestant church is not as hierarchical as the Catholic Church, where you have to get permission from the top. But I think we should keep on trying to get the help from the Vatican, because it's a moral issue. It's destroying families, and it's rampant, not just in the United States, but in other countries.
I've heard that it's not just here. I've read some articles. I know in the UK,
right? Probably
there's an issue. There's a problem with it as well. I guess so. They heard about it and said it's working. It's very lucrative.
Yeah, right. And it's a problem, I believe, in Canada, probably Australia.
Australia, I heard as well, right?
And you did have recently. You received a letter from through our efforts, the Father Dennis Yesalonia, and he's really big with the Roman Catholic Church. He had set up a meeting with us, and then asked for our material, and then in a very nice letter, complimentary. I don't have it here, but he referred us to the, the Catholic diocese here in Manhattan, and it was very supportive of what you were trying to do. It was complimentary, and but that we would have more effectiveness with the diocese because they were more politically involved. Words to that effect. And you also, as I recall, went to the United Nations Holy See mission. I know we both went there for one meeting. That was a few years ago, but together, the more people that read this, that see our reports, as I pointed out to Tony in our earlier conversation before this live show, the more that they are exposed to this problem. We have our churches that are dwindling in participation. The parishes are drying up. Churches are being closed because there's a perception that the church, the hierarchy, is the bureaucracy, as Tony's pointed out, is giving the impression they're not interested in these key problems that are affecting so many people, such that suicides and murders and children are all being, seen.
Well, it's like in our Congress. They're not paying attention.
Well, that's true too. Yeah, that's true. So somehow or another, the idea is to create, at least what I'm trying to do, and I've been trying to do, I know Tony has as well, is to create some kind of a lobby group or organization that could speak for parents. I'm not talking about like the National Parents Organization. It's a good group of people. But I'm talking, or social groups or whatever, or those that are one and out, short-lived. Alec Baldwin, who was big in the movement for a couple of years, and then he exited.
I think, excuse me for 1 second, Leon, I think Alec Baldwin got his, he went and had 6 more kids.
Yeah.
It seems to me it was his way of making up for the daughter people.
Is it really 6? Wow.
I think he got, it's at least 5. It might be 6.
Wow.
Yeah.
And now he's got some real big problems.
That every year.
Wow. Well, in any event, these people haven't stayed in the movement. So what we're trying to do is create one that will be established and give it, longevity, so that whenever a big issue may arise, this group, like all the other special interest groups, and whatever is speaking for these groups, whoever is, we will be able to come out and explain what is really going on, or oppose something, or support something, shared parenting legislation and that sort of thing. So, the word is kind of getting out in many respects. I know in my hometown, I'm told that there's a lot more shared parenting types of rulings coming out, that judges are, scolding, lawyers who are just, breeding protracted, needless controversies. There is a certain consciousness, if you will, even if they won't admit it, at least not publicly, that they are seeing the problem, and there are, things being done. I mean, if you do nothing, then certainly.
Not see this problem.
What's that?
How could they ever expect anybody to believe that they don't see the problem?
Well, that's a good point, Andrea. I don't know. I guess it comes down to the gold mine, which I've mentioned time and again. When you got money being made hand over fist like this, easy money, you get mom fighting with dad, and the lawyers know what they're doing. They get dad, making up some kind of, family offense petition. Mom's getting a protection order, and they're almost entertained by this gladiator type environment. The contentious nature, the adversarial nature of the legal profession is not something that should be, promoted in these particular courts, and yet they are, because it's lucrative. And there's the big problem. That's at the center of all of this. Money, like it usually is.
Yeah, that's the bottom line. It really is, Leon. It's the bottom line. In fact, the judges on the case might be really, well, I'm totally involved, but it's my sister's case. Technically, it's our case. I've seen the judges, I've heard the judges say things that are totally unrelated. They just throw something out there.
Right.
A note came in. It was written in my niece's handwriting, but I know it was dictated to her. I know that. There's no doubt in my mind. And the judge who was just there, she was actually, I guess, substituting for the judge that was usually there. And she looked at the note, doesn't know us, my niece from Adam, and she says, "Oh, she's writing now?" My niece was 12 years old. She was writing since she was in kindergarten.
Wow.
Why would you even say something like that?
Yeah, I agree.
It's weird.
It is. In any event, we try to keep these programs going, to bring input in. Keep in mind, these videos do reappear, on the site after the fact, and so anybody can see it. We do get a lot of views after we conclude these sessions. Not everybody can go live. I've decided to go Monday through Friday live because I think I could keep some consistency. Andrea's been one of our regulars. I appreciate that. I think she's got lots to offer, and will continue to do so as others that are regulars and participate, and maybe not every day, but we do have those that have been here pretty much every day from the beginning. We are only, we had 5 days last week. Friday, we had to cancel early because of the interferences. Monday was just an opening introduction. We didn't take any calls. And we had, this is 4 set. We had to cancel Monday for the interference. But again, we have had some, let's see, so 2, 3, and then 3 this week. So we've only had 6 sessions, live sessions. And so we're very embryonic. There's a lot of, but then we have people subscribing every day, and a lot of talk. People are calling me. I got a call from a gentleman in California yesterday, just before I was getting the show started, and I was struggling then. We were fortunate to go live. We're lucky, I guess, to be live today. The high-end camera is working, the tripod, but you know, it's not easy to set this up. If we had to go with the PC camera, you wouldn't even hardly see us. We couldn't even proceed. And there were times when the camera was cut off. One of those days I had to go with the backup. We would not be able to do that today. We want to go on the road like this more often, different places, as I have done over the years, everywhere from Paris to Hawaii, Philadelphia, New York City, Washington, D.C., many times, different parts of the country, San Francisco. I was uninvited to the Super Bowl there back a number of years ago because it was a group protesting outside the Super Bowl, and they wanted me down there as a guest speaker, Florida. So, you know, it's if we could do more of these sorts of things, Leon's library, it doesn't mean it always has to be with a book background. Right now we got this beautiful backdrop. It's not too good from your perspective, but you can see the Queensboro Bridge. That's the Manhattan skyline in the background. We're in Long Island City, which is just across the East River from Manhattan, and it's a high-rise hotel. And we have a conference room here. There's also ballroom. There's a restaurant, rooftop restaurant. And we actually had news conferences up there way back in the when Tony ran for Congress. So we've been all over Long Island, Manhattan, trying to spread the word and attending events like at the United Nations, the Holy See Mission, as Tony has mentioned. And so we are getting the word out. We are the people. The underground, call us what you want, but we are doing what the mainstream media is not, what they should be doing, and what oversight commissions need to be doing and are not. That's why we created the CCAC. But we are the people under our First Amendment, our Constitution. We are the people, self-governing nation, that needs to take action on these things. It's a hard battle. I sympathize with everybody who's tried and gotten lost in the muck here, disappointed time and again. I went through, like Tony went through, some 14, 15 years of it. In the last 12 or 13 as a reform advocate. I met him a number of years ago, and then we hooked up to do different kinds of reform efforts. Whenever something was up, we would make some plans and attend. Sometimes just Tony would go out with different groups, or me upstate or elsewhere in the country. But, we have to keep it going, and we have to communicate in this manner, like what I'm trying to do here. So in any event, if there's nothing else, Tony, you have anything to conclude with?
Well, again, I would say we have to keep trying, and I've given out a variety of ideas. We need to try to connect with people. We can't do it by ourselves. We need to, as I say, connect with whatever religious leaders or community leaders or people in schools, whatever in our neighborhood, and make them aware of this issue, and try to create a movement that will bring about justice. It needs to be.
Unfortunately, some of the schools are taken in by the whole thing. They become part of. They use some of the the guidance counselors and teachers in the schools to further their agenda. I'm talking about the family court.
Yes, I understand.
They actually do. I've experienced that.
Yeah. Well, we need a new civil rights movement. And the civil rights movement involved religious leaders, so we need another one. And we have a moral and constitutional issue that should be able to gain support from a wide spectrum of the citizenry.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you all
for what you do. Thank you. All right, I'm going to let you go.
I want to thank all of you for those who participate, current live and afterwards. I would like to see if I can, I'd like to see if I could get this view. This is a sensational view, but there's just too much interference. If I can get this camera, I can